Brandon Lewis, a 69-year-old black retiree in Las Vegas, asked his son Owen to pull into the neighborhood supermarket off Sahara so he could buy a simple vanilla cake before they went to visit Owen's in-laws. The afternoon sun pressed on the asphalt, and the automatic doors exhaled cold air as Brandon stepped inside, found the bakery case, and chose a modest round cake with white icing and a small plastic rose that looked cheerful without being flashy. At the register, the cashier, a gray-haired man with a faded name tag that read Eli, rang the cake up, glanced at Brandon's card, then at his face, and in a low, urgent voice asked, "Are you Owen's father?" Brandon nodded, confused, and the cashier's hand closed around his wrist with a quick squeeze, not cruel, but firm enough to send a chill through him. "Sir, I shouldn't say this," Eli whispered, eyes steady, "but your daughter-in-law's family spends big here. Imported meats, champagne, cosmetics, same days they tell your son they can't pay rent. If you want the truth, look for it right now. I'll finish your sale like nothing happened." He released the wrist, bagged the cake, and said, "Have a nice day," in a normal tone as the scanner beeped for the next customer. Brandon's heart beat harder than the store's hum, and he signed the receipt with a shaky pen, then followed a stock cart down the service hallway and slipped out the back door into heat and compressor noise. He tucked himself between two green dumpsters that smelled of orange peels and bleach, where he could see the front entrance through the gap by the loading dock. He texted Owen, "Long line, be right out," and steadied his breath. 5 minutes later, the glass doors parted and Leonard, Sienna's father from family photos, stepped into view carrying glossy black bags stamped with gold letters from the upscale grocer across town, not this discount chain. Leonard walked to a pale silver sedan so new the dealer frame still hugged the plates, opened the trunk and set the bags inside with careful hands, then leaned on the bumper and made a call, shoulders loose, laughing once in a way that did not sound like a man under bills. Two older women pushed carts past the curb, one saying, "Saw Sienna at the mall yesterday, French creams again," and the other replying, "She's always buying, my niece works there." Brandon felt the warning in Eli's voice press against what he was seeing. Leonard went back inside, reappeared with a smaller bag, peeled off cash to tip a car wash kid, and checked the lot with a quick scan as if counting eyes. Nothing looked desperate. New shoes, bright watch, fresh haircut. Brandon stared at the cake box in his hands and thought about every late-night call when Owen said he was wiring money for medicine or rent. A breeze rattled the dumpster lids, and Brandon understood that this moment, ordinary and bright under the desert sun, was the hinge. He stepped deeper into the shade, kept still, and watched, determined to gather what he needed before he spoke a single word to his son. Owen pulled away from the curb, still humming the radio, and Brandon sat quiet with the cake on his knees, the plastic dome fogging a little from the heat. He kept his voice steady as they drove toward Henderson, asking simple things, how work was, whether the air conditioner in Owen's apartment had finally been fixed, and only once did he ask about Leonard's job, and Owen answered like before. Cut hours, Mom says it's been rough, then added that they had been helping with rent again this month. The neighborhood they entered was neat. Desert plants trimmed tight, driveways swept, no sign of the hardship Brandon had been told. Sienna opened the door before they could ring. Bright dress, new highlights, a thin chain at her throat catching light, and she hugged Brandon with a perfume he recognized from a display case he never approached because of the price. "You shouldn't have brought anything," she said when she saw the cake, then took the box to a kitchen that smelled like garlic, lemon, and something buttery. Brandon paused in the living room. Last time there had been a fabric sofa and an old TV stand. Now there was a leather sectional, a glass coffee table, a large flat screen mounted cleanly, and a woven basket with a boutique tag still tucked inside. New curtains hung straight, the area rug was thick and fresh, corners still wanting to lie flat. Leonard came from the kitchen in the same crisp shirt Brandon had seen at the store, an apron tied on like proof he had been cooking all day, smiling as he lifted foil. Marbled steaks seared, shrimp on ice, bright herbs, little jars with labels in French. By the sink stood a bottle Brandon knew from the high shelf, an expensive wine, resting beside crystal stems. "Friend deal," Leonard said easily when Brandon's eyes paused, and Sienna nodded. "We always hunt discounts," tapping her phone as it buzzed, then flipping it face down with a small private smile. They ate at a table set with heavy plates and linen napkins. Sienna praising Owen's patience at work, Leonard talking about consulting on weekends, never naming the company, and Brandon asked two soft questions: what kind of consulting, who the client was, and got operations and a friend's firm as answers that floated without weight. After lunch, Sienna gave a tour to show the paint and floors, and Brandon walked behind her, seeing polished plank, framed prints, a bedroom with shopping bags lined like trophies along a bench, tissue still puffed. "Clearance," Sienna said cheerfully when she noticed his glance, and Leonard added from the hall, "Right time, right place," the words practiced smooth. Brandon did not argue. He noticed the expensive salt on the stove, the imported soap in the bathroom, a small envelope from a jeweler on a dresser half slid under a scarf. Back in the living room, Owen sank onto the new sectional and talked about a movie night they should all plan. And Brandon nodded, storing details the way a careful man counts change: decor, food, labels, smiles that arrived to beat late. When they left near sunset, the house lights came on in a soft, warm way, and Brandon walked to the car with the empty cake box under his arm and the feeling that he had just toured a story that looked pretty and did not hold together when you pressed on the seams. On the drive back towards Spring Valley, Brandon kept his tone light, asking Owen about next week's schedule and whether the boss had backed off. And only once did he circle to Leonard's consulting, letting Owen repeat the same soft answer: a friend's firm, weekend stuff, while the radio filled the gaps. At a red light, Brandon glanced at the silver sedan in the lane beside them and saw his own reflection, cake box empty on the floor, and promised himself not to speak until he had something Owen could not explain away. At home, he put water on the stove for tea, set the cake dome on the counter, and sat at the small table with his pocket notebook, the one he used for bills, and began listing the day in clean lines. 3:12 p.m. Eli at register. Warning. 3:20 p.m. Back door. Dumpsters. 3:26 p.m. Leonard with gold-lettered bags. 3:29 p.m. New silver sedan. 3:35 p.m. Cash tip to car wash kid. 5:04 p.m. New sofa, new TV, imports on the counter. 5:40 p.m. Shopping bags in bedroom. Jeweler's envelope. He wrote slowly, each detail a weight he could feel in the pen. His phone buzzed on the table, an unknown number, and he almost let it go, then tapped it open. A photo filled the screen, an upscale grocer's logo at the top, date stamped 2 days earlier, total over $400, and line after line of items he could name by price from memory: imported shrimp, dry-aged ribeye, French cheese, 2 bottles of wine from the top shelf. At the bottom, the customer name, Leonard Williams. A second text followed, plain and careful. "I'm Eli, the cashier. I know it's not my place. If I am wrong, forgive me. You should see this." Brandon stared until the screen dimmed, then typed back, "Received. Thank you." He set the phone down, lifted it again, and zoomed the date, the tender's last 4 digits, the manager's initials, then flipped through his notebook to the week Owen had called about medicine and rent short, circling amounts he had jotted beside those calls. The dates hugged each other like magnets. He poured his tea and did not taste it. The phone buzzed once more, a second receipt from last week, this one over $600, champagne and shellfish bold in the middle of the tape. And Brandon saved both images to a folder, then copied the times into his notes. He felt no rush to accuse, only a tight, steady calm, the way he used to feel as a young man lining up numbers at the loading dock to make sure every pallet matched the bill. When the kettle whistled again on low, he turned off the flame and sat in the quiet, hearing the soft tick of cooling metal and the distant hum of traffic on Decatur. He drew a box on the last page and wrote a simple plan. Wait, collect, confirm. Ask Owen to bring receipts of transfers. Ask Leonard for consulting details. If stories bend, show proof. He closed the notebook, slid the phone on top, and breathed out, knowing the next step was patience, not noise. On Monday, Brandon kept to his plan. Wait, collect, confirm. So when Ely texted 2 more photos on Tuesday morning, Brandon saved them in a folder called Receipts, wrote the dates in his notebook, and drew a line to the days Sienna had told Owen rent short and medicine not covered. That afternoon, a neighbor named Hermione called after getting Brandon's number through a church friend, her voice careful as she said she lived 2 doors down from Leonard and saw delivery trucks most Fridays, party tents one Saturday, and a caterer unloading trays last week. Brandon thanked her, asked for dates, and wrote those too, each note a small nail holding the picture still. On Wednesday, Owen stopped by after work, tie loosened, face gray with tired, and stood in the doorway with a sigh before he even sat. Sienna says Leonard needs a small procedure Friday. Insurance light, $200 by morning, he said, rubbing his brow, and Brandon heard the same words he had written in his book under other dates. He poured coffee, slid the mug across, and said, "I want to show you something before you send $1." He unlocked his phone, opened the folder, and held up the first receipt, the grocer's logo bright at the top, the date 2 days before their visit, the total over $400, the line items neat and costly, imported shrimp, ribeye, French cheese, 2 premium wines, with Leonard Williams at the bottom. Owen leaned forward, jaw tight. "Where did you get this?" he asked. And Brandon told the story from start to now, step by step, no heat, just facts. Eli's whisper at the register, the back door, the new silver sedan, the gold-lettered bags, the tip to the car wash kid, the living room upgrades, the jeweler's envelope, Hermione's call, the second receipt for over $600 with champagne and shellfish right beside the day Sienna said rent due by midnight. Owen's eyes kept returning to the dates and totals, his mouth set like a man trying to hold 2 truths at once. "Maybe they had a good week," he said, but his voice lacked push. Brandon opened his small notebook and showed the tidy list he had kept. Times, items, the TV photo he had taken with the news reflection on the glass, then closed it gently and said, "I'm not asking you to stop caring. I'm asking you to ask for proof." Silence sat with them a long moment, broken by the soft tick of the kitchen clock. Finally, Owen nodded, slow like his neck ached. "Okay," he said. "I'll ask tonight. Receipts, doctor's info, details on that consulting job, and if the answers float, I'm done." Brandon reached across the table and squeezed his son's forearm once, the way Eli had grabbed his wrist, not to scare but to steady. "Text me from the house if you need me," he said. Owen stood, pocketed his keys, glanced at the folder name, Receipts, and gave a short, humorless breath that wanted to be a laugh. "I'll start with the facts," he said, and walked out into the desert evening, the sky over Las Vegas going orange to purple, while Brandon sat very still, phone face down, waiting for whatever the truth would do next. Owen called just after midnight with his voice tight, and Brandon sat up in bed, phone pressed to his ear. As Owen spoke in quick pieces, he had gotten home calm, asked Sienna for receipts for the procedure, the clinic name, and details about Leonard's weekend consulting. At first, she smiled wide and said he was being dramatic. Then she said the papers were in the car, then at Dad's, then misplaced. The answers changing like channels. And when Owen kept asking, her eyes sharpened and she snapped that his family never trusted her. Owen ended the talk and went to the bedroom closet, hands shaking, and found 3 glossy bags from stores that did not do bargains, tissues still puffed, shoes in boxes with price stickers on the ends. He opened the dresser drawer and lifted sweaters and found a small jeweler's envelope with a tag tucked inside. In her purse, under a makeup pouch, he found a black notebook with neat columns, dates and amounts in blue ink, a heading that read, Asks, and a list that matched his transfers, rent short, medicine, late fee, each line marked paid, and on the next pages, future plans. Mom dental emergency, $1,800, followed by a note, if he hesitates, remind family duty, say we'll pay you back soon, mention Dad's hours cut.
When he brought the notebook out, Sienna lunged for it, voice raised, then froze when he read the dates aloud. She tried a new angle, tears coming fast, saying he had broken her privacy, that Brandon had poisoned him, that he was choosing his mother over his wife. And Owen, still steady, showed her the photos Brandon had taken, the wine, the TV, the receipt images from Eli with totals and dates. And he asked one more time for the clinic name. She stared at him, then called Leonard on speaker. Leonard started with the old line about a rough season, but when Owen read the menu of the $600 receipt and asked how their rent could be late on the same day, Leonard exhaled and said, flat and tired, "Kid, you have a job. We needed help. It's not personal, it's business." Sienna turned on her father, cursing him for saying it out loud, and then, in a hard voice Owen had never heard, said, "You are always easy to convince. Look at you, still asking for proof at midnight." Owen told Brandon he listened to himself breathing in the silence after that, like a person learning a new room in the dark, and then he made his choice. He told Sienna their marriage was over, that there would be no more money for any of them, that he would sleep on the couch and speak to a lawyer in the morning. She threw the notebook at the wall, shouted that he would regret it, slammed the bedroom door and locked it. Owen sat on the couch with the notebook open on his knees and called his father. Brandon said softly, "You loved right. They used wrong," and told him to come by at sunrise so they could plan the next steps with clear heads. Owen said okay, and for the first time in months, Brandon heard ease under his son's hurt.
At sunrise, Brandon brewed strong coffee and waited with the notebook on the table. When Owen arrived, eyes red but steady, they sat shoulder to shoulder and went page by page, taking clear photos and writing a simple list of dates, amounts, and stories. At 9, they drove to a modest law office on Flamingo, where a calm woman explained the steps, asked for bank statements, and copied the notebook. She told Owen to freeze any joint cards and to move his direct deposit. After that, Owen packed a suitcase and moved into a short-term place near Spring Valley, a small studio with a cold air unit and a clean view of the parking lot. Each night that week, he forwarded transfers from his banking app to the lawyer, and Brandon dropped off 2 sandwiches and sat on a crate while Owen sorted documents into real bills and asks, the notebook open like a map. By Friday, the lawyer filed. In the weeks that followed, Discovery pulled more threads, a secret savings account in Sienna's name, purchases marked as household that were jewelry and clothes, and delivery invoices that matched Hermione's dates. Brandon met Eli for coffee at the supermarket cafe to say thank you. Eli's hands shook around his paper cup, and he said he had watched his own mother lose everything once because nobody spoke up. Brandon gripped his forearm and said, "You spoke in time." The court hearings were quiet and plain. No shouting, just records and answers. When it ended, Owen signed the decree with a slow breath, then walked outside into dry sun and called Brandon to say it was done. Life reset itself in small steps after that. Owen built a rule for giving: verify, document, then help, and tested it the first time a coworker asked for hospital money, calling the hospital, learning there was no patient by that name, and choosing not to send $1. He began to save again, cooked at home, slept full nights. Brandon also changed little habits. He kept receipts in a labeled envelope, checked prices twice, and practiced saying, "Let me see the paperwork," without apology. Months later, Owen brought a woman from his office to meet Brandon, a clear-eyed person named Regina, who arrived with a bag of groceries and said, "We thought we'd cook here." They chopped onions and peppers at the small counter while the radio hummed a soul station, and Brandon felt the room loosen. Regina said softly, "We don't mix love with money stories," and Brandon believed her because she did not try to sell it. Seasons turned. Owen found a small house with a tidy yard and asked Brandon to bring over his old grill. On Sundays, they watched the Raiders and called Eli and Hermione for dinner once a month. Simple food, plain talk. Sometimes, late, Brandon would think of the back door, the heat by the dumpsters, the 5 minutes that opened the whole thing, and he would say to himself, not bitter, just sure,
that kindness needs guardrails and money needs light. Then he would sleep easy, knowing his son stood on clean ground.